Hello, I'm Richard Gisbert, and you're at The Listening Post. This week, elections in Pakistan. The electronic media there view the vote from the sidelines. The sectarian divide in Iraq as seen on TV. Pan-Arab news stations sign up to a controversial code of conduct. And Grand Central Station grinds to a halt. Welcome back. The newspaper headlines across Pakistan welcome the results of the parliamentary elections there, and democratic forces in the country were relieved the vote went off without the kind of large-scale political violence that claimed the life of the late Benazir Bhutto. However, one key aspect of any election campaign was missing. The electronic media, which have provided Pakistan with lively, highly critical debate, were largely absent, with some major political commentators kept off the air, still silenced since the state of emergency was declared in November. So what did the shortage of political coverage mean for the parties? That's our starting point this week. Pakistan, the elections, and the state of the electronic media there. There was a lot riding on this election for the Pakistani people, their political leaders, and for the country's media. However, two events overshadowed the vote and the coverage of it: the killing in late December of opposition leader Benazir Bhutto, and the clampdown on media that accompanied President Musharraf's state of emergency in November. The Bhutto assassination resulted in a collective fear factor. Many Pakistanis became too afraid to attend political rallies. Many reporters were too scared to cover them.
The biggest restriction is the fear of violence. A lot of political rallies have been targeted. Suicide bombers have struck at sort of election campaign rallies. Benazir Bhutto's assassination was the biggest such incident, but since then it has not stopped. So the biggest restriction is that we're very, very scared of sending out our reporters to go and attend these rallies, because you never know what will happen where.
Fear of suicide bombers also kept ordinary Pakistanis away.
The election rallies, the large election rallies up to 500,000 people, and sometimes the rallies march from one city to the other. So all that is not taking place, and most of the election campaign itself, which is very dull and lackluster, is taking place in the form of corner meetings and small rallies or television discussions. So, the media is reflecting the reality on the ground, I think, to a great extent.
The news channels the Musharraf government targeted when it called its state of emergency were gradually allowed back on the cable systems that most Pakistanis use to watch television. But they were restored only after agreeing to a new code of conduct, which banned many forms of criticism, including criticizing the president.
These factors have contributed in helping the government exercise a much more robust control in Pakistan's electronic media. But yet at the same time, I would say that there is no direct censorship of the electronic media. The government, through its regulatory orders and through pressure tactics, has forced the private television channels to self-censor them, to self-regulate them.
The changes did not go unnoticed by the audience.
The viewers are not happy, not only from Jio TV but also from other TV channels like Aaj and ARY. The viewers are of the view that after the restoration of the TV channels on cable, there is no balance in the talk shows, and they think that most of the anchors, they don't pose hard questions to the government ministers, and they pose hard questions to only to the opposition leaders. So I must admit that the Pakistani TV channels lost a lot of credibility after the restoration.
The crackdown on media focused mostly on television news. Pakistan has such a low literacy rate, the authorities are less concerned over the impact of print journalism than television.
People felt that there was a sort of absence of the news. It was reported that less people are watching the news channels. More people were trying to watch BBC and Al Jazeera. At the same time, there's a greater reliance on the internet and radio, for instance.
Even when the more critical channels, such as Jio TV, were put back on cable systems, some of their key news anchors were not. Critical voices like Hamid Mir, who blames the president for knocking him off the air.
Just one day before the restoration of Jio TV, he had a meeting with some bosses of the management of Jio TV, and he demanded that I will only restore Jio TV if you agree to ban Hamid Mir and Dr. Shahid Masood on Jio TV. So you see, GeoTV was banned for more than 10 weeks. The jobs of more than 5,000 employees were at stake, and our management consulted us and they said that we have no other option than to ban us. So what do you think? So we said, okay, we are ready to sacrifice. So Pervez Musharraf imposed ban on myself and another anchor in GeoTV on gunpoint. It's a clear blackmailing.
Geo News was back in business 1 month before the election, on January 21st. The timing was no coincidence. It happened 1 day before President Musharraf traveled to the European Union, where he was grilled on the state of media in Pakistan.
Members here will be anxious to know and to have assurances from you this afternoon that you will be doing everything you can to ensure that Pakistan has free and fair elections, and that the media will be allowed to function entirely independent and without any pitfalls or without any impediments being put in front of them.
Not everyone in Pakistan opposes the clampdown on free media there.
In December, an American think tank did a survey of attitudes towards the declaration of a state of emergency, and while the vast majority, 3/4, were against it, 22% of people, for example, said that they supported the clampdown on the media, the shutdown of the private news channels. Channels were criticised for acting a bit like Fox News in America or something, of being very strident and unbalanced and so on. So if you took that point of view, you could say that now, well, they're behaving a bit more responsibly in what they show, they're a bit more moderate and balanced in their coverage.
Ultimately, the defeat of the Pakistan Muslim League Q, the party supporting President Musharraf, is being seen by the media as a victory for the media.
Journalists are quite cynical and the commentators are quite cynical. A majority of people are cautiously optimistic about the future of the country. People tend to believe, with some reservations, that things will get better after the election. And I think same can be said about the media as well.
Electronic media ultimately will emerge victorious, and I think the people and the decision makers inside the electronic media understand this thing, that these restrictions are not sustainable.
Because governments, presidents, they come and go. But the media, in one form or another, are always there to write the final version of the story. Our Global Village Voices now, and their views on the coverage of the vote in Pakistan.
The coverage of the election in the English language media of Pakistan has been fairly open and critical, partly because many of the commentators live overseas. However, the vernacular Urdu media has faced some restrictions. Particularly, the TV news channels have been under great scrutiny. There is also concern, of course, of what will happen after the election if the results do not favor the establishment. So the real test remains to be seen of how the government will allow press coverage after the elections.
Even though media is quite free, and if it uses this liberty judicially, it can play a very positive and constructive role in projecting and promoting the views of all the candidates without any bias.
Recently, the government issued a directive under which 7 journalists were named that they should not be allowed to participate in their talk shows or in their news programs. The reason is that the government considered them as very friendly to the civil movement of the civil society, or government consider that they would represent the point of view of the opposition parties. So I consider it it's a sort of a media censorship.
We're always in the market for more smart takes on media, more Global Village Voices. Email us at listeningpost@aljazeera.net. We have the technology, webcam, or even camera phone to get you on the air. Our Listening Post News Bites start this week with concerns that the Arab League is trying to take the journalistic bite out of Arab broadcasters. At a special meeting of the League convened by Egypt and Saudi Arabia, delegates complained that some satellite channels were, in their words, straying from the correct path, that it was time to confront them. They drafted new regulations, a code of conduct, to prevent channels from, quote, broadcasting anything which calls into question God, the monotheistic religion, the prophets, sects, or symbols of the various religious communities. The only countries refusing to endorse the Cairo Charter were Lebanon and Qatar, home of Al Jazeera. Wada Khanfar, Al Jazeera's Director General, said the proposed charter was a risk to freedom of expression in the Arab world. Kosovo's recent declaration of independence from Serbia had headline writers across the Balkans working overtime and stretching the bounds of journalistic decency. How bad did it get? A couple of newspapers dropping the F-bomb on the front page. The battle of the headlines began with the Serb daily Blitz declaring Kosovo stolen. However, the Gazeta Express, a Kosovar Albanian paper, bid farewell to Serb rule with a four-letter word. The next day, another Serbian daily, Dnevna Novina, responded. Same swear word, different ending. Gentlemen of the press from the Balkans. Barack Obama, the greatest American orator of his generation, or a rabble-rousing demagogue? One right-wing commentator on Fox News Radio in the U.S., Tom Sullivan, has made up his mind by comparing the Democratic presidential candidate's rhetorical style to that of Adolf Hitler.
So, ladies and gentlemen, from the past, a little archive, a little walk down Der Führer's memory lane. Here he is, the one, the only Adolf Hitler.
Wir wollen, dass dieses Volk ein Fried lieben und aber auch unheimlich friedfertig sein.
Yay!
Accused of trying to smear the candidate, Sullivan later backtracked with desperate attempts to deny he had equated Obama with Hitler. Too late. It's all on YouTube. And the U.S. media are still confusing Obama with Osama. Here's MSNBC's Chris Matthews.
Also, what did Barack Obama say and why is it causing controversy? Well,
but check out the graphic. Matthews, who's been quite error-prone in covering the election, later apologized, though he was too embarrassed to specify what he was apologizing for. Chinese authorities often have issues with political bloggers there, but they're not above quoting bloggers when it suits their purposes. An example, the public relations battle over Steven Spielberg. The American film director recently quit his job as an artistic advisor to the upcoming Beijing Olympics over China's policies in Sudan, specifically Darfur. The Xinhua news agency quotes bloggers who accuse Spielberg of, quote, living in a sci-fi world unable to distinguish dreams from reality. Various private Chinese sites took on Spielberg for linking politics with sport, and official Chinese media piled on. The Guangming Daily questions Spielberg's political credentials, saying he is unqualified to blame the Chinese government. We're back after the break with a story about sectarianism and the news media in Iraq.